In a recent study you can find on PubMed, 67% of volunteers rated the psilocybin occasioned experience, also considered a trip or at least a hero's dose, as being among the 5 most personally meaningful and among the 5 most spiritually significant experiences of their lives. 64% indicated the experience increased well-being or life satisfaction. Now, at this time, it's important for me to tell you that this is not medical or legal advice, nor even a suggestion of what your experience would be if you partake in any sort of plant medicine. Different people have different experiences. After my recreational experience with magic mushrooms, my friends invited me a few months later to what was called a sacred ceremony in Mexico, which I believe is also called Ninos Santos, or the ceremony of the Holy Children. This was not at all a recreational activity, but for me and many others, I think it's better than a day at Disneyland, a lot less expensive, and probably good for you. We arrived at a semi-remote location that had been recently set up for the purposes of spiritual retreats, predominantly in plant medicine. There was a fire in the middle that was meticulously kept, going by a person dedicated almost specifically only for that purpose. There were yoga mats surrounding the entire fire to the tune of about 30 or 40 people. I was there with my partner, and we had 2 of our friends on each side of us. It was a while before we took the actual medicine, and I was both excited and anxious. Now, as you can see, I'm fairly old, and so I researched this type of thing before I started participating. What I learned was that psilocybin doesn't really have negative physiological effects on the body, and you don't need to worry about overdosing or anything like that. A reminder that this is not medical advice, just my understanding. Also, you are not pushed to take any specific amount and given the option to go light or go heavy. I always go heavy as possible. The setting is quite gorgeous. Everybody has a candle in front of them, except for us, as we didn't know the drill. And there were trees and some things that were decorative placed, obviously to enhance the experience. After a short time, we finally took our first dose of medication and a cup of cacao, where we were asked what size dose we would like. This was done in a very orderly manner, and after receiving the dose, each person returned to their yoga mat. Now, the circle included the shaman and his wife and other family members, as well as what I would later find out to be participants who were musicians adding to this magical experience. Once the medicine hit, the shaman turned into the main musician for the event, or so I thought, and he began to strum a guitar and play some very sweet music. That sort of led us into the journey. Then was played a more electronic song over the sound system that literally directed you to look into the sky, and what I saw was amazing. Unfortunately, with much of the experience, it's going to be impossible to articulate with words, but music and sound seems to be a major component to using the mushrooms to heal the body and the mind. As the evening progresses, and this is an overnight experience, you get lost in the wonderful music and lose track of time and space. By the time that first dose would wear off, you are given the option to get up and get a second dose. Almost everyone opts for the second dose, and again, it's a very orderly process, and people immediately return to their yoga mat. So I will try and articulate a few of the things that I can remember and articulate from the first dose. One of my friends to my left at one point looked like the image of my father laying down in his hospital bed. There wasn't really a message there, I don't think, but it was somehow comforting. My partner always seemed to have his back to me, which I have a theory about, but that unfortunately I have to wait to a future episode. To my right were my other 2 friends, one of whom seemed to go between being a young child to a very old woman, if I took a second glance. Now, many people close their eyes during these things, but I can't. I consider this a Broadway show. I need to see everything that's going on. So what else did I see? Well, it was a group of 3 people in front of a couple of candles turned into a huge family in a foreign country trying to share a meal. People would age up and down, they would change genders very quickly, and I would see many people take the form of my loved ones in life. People who were close to the fire were often the stars of the show at that moment. At any point, the music stopped. It was very surreal. Despite being in a very remote area, your hearing is so accentuated that you can hear a motorbike that is probably miles away. Of course, it might also be 50 feet away. At many times, the shaman will walk around playing his guitar, but you have no idea where he is unless you look, because you no longer have a sense of whether he's on your right side, left side, or in front of you. Now, I should say that I'm definitely left ear, totally, so I don't know what the experience is for you people who have both of yours working. But even the simplest of sounds, such as a sound bath, which is also part of the ceremony, can take all the focus off any external sounds that might exist. Your eyes immediately catch any new light that comes on the scene. For example, there's a place where people go to smoke. The minute they light up, it's as if there's an explosion. It's not scary or anything, it's just funny. About an hour into the second dose, a new musician is introduced. Not formally, I mean a new musician basically appears. This musician is dressed in an outfit that is so interesting. It's like a bright what seems to be satin material, and he has a turban wrapped around his head. He looked like Aladdin. Again, people are just relaxing on their yoga mats, processing everything that's going on, and he begins to do his thing and makes great music with various instruments that one day I'll learn what they're called. The first one is sort of an accordion-looking like thing where he holds it to his side and walks around the circle, and it has a very intense vibrating buzz that seems to literally be rewiring your brain. Next, the music becomes like a more folkloric style music, and he goes around in the circle with this very long instrument that he blows into. And when he came to me, between his outfit and the commanding sound coming out of his instrument, and about 3 trees as the background setting, I was immediately transferred to some sort of a magical land where the trees were dancing, and they weren't normal trees, these were trees from a different dimension. I was mesmerized. So as I said before, the whole evening is without time and space, so this is my best recollection. At some point, the group of musicians that were also participants joined, and each of them had an interesting sounding instrument, but all of them had great impact on my mind, creating different visuals and thoughts. This was after COVID-19 and after I suffered much loss from not only the virus, but the division caused by the response to the virus. I had just lost faith in mankind. There are enough fears associated with getting older, but the COVID era has been the single worst event in my lifetime. So I would have thoughts about these people that I lost, and I would immediately be consoled and showed in some way that I didn't need to worry about it. I'll be covering that more when I discuss my brother's death in another video. So the whole evening was a combination of entertainment and then going very deep and going to my own funeral, which I won't be having because I don't really believe in them, and then going to my partner's funeral and having some gentle energy from the universe either tell me or show me that there's nothing to worry about. In fact, it seemed like the universe was laughing at me in some sort of cartoonish manner for even thinking that anything bad really happens. I'll give you an example of a visual. Now, both of my parents have passed away, and naturally I miss them terribly. So when my mind wandered to think of them, they came to me in the animation portion of the evening, and up in the sky I saw a cartoon version of my mother, where my mind seemed to be asking her questions, and she answered visually through this cartoon version of her. Let me just say that I still miss them terribly, but I don't worry about where they are anymore. I know they're fine. At this point I'm going to mix a couple of ceremonies together because this is common, it seems, to all of them. I'm not sure if it's in the second dose or third dose, which happens at approximately 3 a.m., but people who are absolutely invisible to me when I arrived seem to be almost introverted, seem to pull out instruments from nowhere and join in some of the songs. I even believe that my partner, who doesn't sing, is singing these songs. I'll frequently try and sneak a peek to catch him singing these songs, which are generally in Spanish. Every time my brain seems to catch an oddity, it's like the Matrix fixes it before I can catch it. So although I was never actually able to catch my partner singing, I still believe he was. Again, I'm going to be doing a video shortly that deals with things like parallel universes, quantum theory, whether or not we're living in a simulation, blah blah blah. I've come to no conclusions on this stuff, but I definitely have some thoughts. By the end of the night, these people who were lit only by candlelight became almost celebrities to me. Every person was just so interesting. At one point, a woman during a high vibration song got in front of the fire and began to move in such a way that she turned into a one-dimensional being. You could literally see her as a human being who was particles in motion. I started to think that none of these people were real, and they were deliberately teasing me by giving me various glances into this truth. Now, this seems very self-centered, and I don't believe exactly at this point that this is true, but this was my experience then. Also, to be clear, this was not paranoia, because I wasn't in fear of any of it, and it also wasn't a bad trip. On the contrary, the whole night, you're just up and down. I laughed and I cried over and over, often dependent on the music. By the way, the music is, for me at least, one of the most important aspects of using mushrooms. I have had what I call private ceremonies in the middle of the city and seen amazing things because of the playlist that I have. There are specific artists that are well known for the medicine music circuit, and I'll be doing a whole video on that. Personally, I can't imagine listening to a lot of the music in my normal daily life, and I can't imagine listening to a normal daily life music during a mushroom ceremony. Throughout the evening, it seemed like people would change clothes a lot. Again, it was like the magic of Disney, almost to the extreme where it seemed like they were putting on costumes. The shaman and his wife looked like the king and queen in a Disney movie with their whole court surrounding them. The sky throughout the night does a lot of things that I've failed yet to be able to find a reasonable explanation, other than in some of those topics that I mentioned earlier. During one particular song, the sky seems to arrange itself with the stars in an order, and the stars either light up or become colored like Christmas lights, and then they even bounce back and forth across the sky. In the next song, it seems like clouds rush in, cover the stars, and act like a movie screen where you see a film. Oftentimes for me, it would see a lot of black and white photo collages. So we have the shaman, who, by the way, does not call himself a shaman. The mushrooms have been in his family for many generations, and he has learned through these generations how to conduct these ceremonies. I will refer to him as a shaman only because for me that is how I experience him. In addition to he and his family and the musicians, there are quite a few people helping out throughout the night. They are walking around with sage and blessing your body. They are spraying scents around you so your heightened senses can be enjoying essential oils more vividly. They even blow children's bubbles from behind you where it's unexpected. They are there to attend to you if you seem to be having an emotional time or any difficulty at all. The overall experience is not like that of an LSD trip at Burning Man, which is more fun, and this is subdued, but probably in the end just as joyful. One other really interesting thing that occurred was when a song played a second time or even a third time, the exact same movements occurred within the group. Meaning, if one person was traveling from point A to point B when the song played the last time, then they were doing the same thing again. This pertains to almost the entire group, with the exception that there was always one or two things that were different, leading me to question about parallel universes. I'll have to do a spoiler alert and say that I've tested this theory on my own since that first ceremony, and there is something to the music being able to create the same circumstances over and over. Now, I'm not sure if that's because your brain records the song and the brain just replays it again, like a music video, or what happens, but I see the same basic things. Unfortunately, every time I seem to be getting to the bottom of it, the Matrix seems to throw something in there to debunk my theory. Maybe it's just that these new parts of your brain that you are using that you normally don't use are perceiving things that are always there in a much clearer way. I also find it interesting that most of the music is in Spanish, yet it seems to have a profound impact on me. Even when I translate the lyrics that I could not have possibly known, the songs elicit a specific response from me that I really should have only gotten because I knew the lyrics to that song. As the third dose wears off, myself and most people are pretty much exhausted. The sun comes up, the shaman, who is not a shaman, announces that it's morning for those who are sleeping. We get up, and there's an integration session where every person shares what the ceremony had achieved for them, more or less. I've never seen anyone who had a bad experience taking the session as a whole. Again, my Spanish is not great, and most of the attendees speak Spanish, so I try and pay close attention to what they're saying, picking up the few words that I do know and looking at their faces and reading their energy. The more profound breakthrough somebody has, the more I understand. In the morning, we always take a picture of the group, which in one of my parallel universe theories, I think is just to prove to me that the people are real. But whatever they are, they seem to be a group of wonderful souls by morning. I often wish we could hang out longer, but for me it's actually a very exhausting experience, and I want to get home to bed as I don't sleep during the ceremony at all. I have also been fasting for about 24 hours, and so despite loving being in this other realm, I want my modern conveniences. Now, it's always recommended that you don't have alcohol or red meat for a couple of days after the ceremony. For me, the medication doesn't seem to wear off until a good 12 hours later. I'm not saying that I can't function, but I'm not sure for about 12 hours that I'm not still seeing slightly more than I would normally. Then for a couple of days, I usually try and reconcile some of the things I saw, heard, and experienced with what we know here in current reality on planet Earth and what it all means. So if none of this is real, why the hell would I worry about it? I'll see you after our next trip.